So I read this book, When Christians Were Jews, The First Generation by Paula Fredriksen. I followed her work for some time. She's a scholar of the New Testament, of Second Temple Judaism, of the Mediterranean world in late antiquity. And then also she's a proponent of the school of thought in biblical scholarship known as Paul within Judaism. And so she writes about how this Jewish messianic movement that believed that Jesus was the Messiah, why it was the way it was, how it formed. She uses the Gospels and what we know about that world to show Jesus acting in a messianic way, and the fact that the resurrection propelled people to believe that they were at the end of time, what we'd call in Hebrew the Acharit Hayamim, the end of days. And so they're going around telling everyone that the world is ending, that the Messiah is going to arrive and rule and reign in Jerusalem, and that the nations are being reconciled back to God. That's Paul's message, and that's why Paul tells the non-Jewish people who believe in the Jewish Messiah that they are reconciled to God without converting to Judaism, even though Paul himself is a Torah-observant Jew. As you read in the book of Acts, like he's going to the temple, he's doing Nazirite vows, he's going to the synagogue. I mean, he's living a Jewish life, but he believes that non-Jewish people don't have to undergo conversion to Judaism because this is part of the prophetic plan for all the nations to be reconciled back to God as well. And so they all believe themselves to be in this last generation in the end of days. And in fact, they turn out to be the first generation of something new that will, within a generation or two of them, will be completely unrecognizable to how they lived their lives and what they believed in, because it will be a completely non-Jewish movement. And this is something I've always kind of wondered about, like, how did the movement that was rooted firmly within Judaism become something else so quickly? And it seems to be the fact that the movement was formed along Jewish apocalyptic lines that thought that the end was imminent. And then when the end doesn't arrive, what happens? And so more and more non-Jews become believers in Jesus as the Son of God, as the Messiah, but it becomes kind of an antithesis to Judaism. And it's just really interesting to think about how this Jewish movement changed so drastically so quickly. And Paula Fredriksen does a great job of setting the context of Jesus and his words and his times, and the context of Paul and the aftermath, the fact that they really believed in the resurrection of Jesus, and that propelled them to spread this message, believing that the end was very near. And I don't know, it's something that I think about quite a lot. For me, this is kind of like therapy. I come from a mixed Jewish and Christian background. I've contended with the idea, the messianic notions of Jesus. People ask me about Jesus all the time, where I live in the rural South, and Jesus in his Jewish context I actually find very compelling. And I've always kind of wondered how what we have as Christianity came about and what we have as Judaism came about, oftentimes in kind of antithesis to one another, these boundaries that were formed. But it took a good little while for the boundaries to form. And so it's interesting to think about what we know is historic fact in terms of scholarship, and then to think about what could have been. And so coming from a mixed Jewish and Christian background myself, and then as someone who chose Judaism and whose parents chose Judaism, I find the scholarship of this book and the and Paula Fredriksen's work in general. And she's someone who I happen to know herself converted to Judaism and has raised Jewish children, and who teaches in Israel now. I find this as thought-provoking as any of these issues were before, but maybe more so. And so it's interesting. I'm kind of curious what non-Jewish, like regular Christian people would think about this. So When Christians Were Jews, the first generation, it'd be a good conversation.